The blood on her hands would not wash away, no matter how hard she scrubbed them raw in the creek water, and Ophelia Jennings knew that some stains lived deeper than skin. She had crawled through 3 miles of sagebrush and dirt after the raid, leaving behind everything she had ever known, including her name, because the woman who had lived in that cabin with her family no longer existed. The year was 1878, and the Dakota Territory was unforgiving to those who survived when they should not have. But she had learned that survival was not a blessing when you had to live with the memories. She stumbled into Bismarck, North Dakota on a Tuesday morning when the sun was already beating down hard enough to make the dirt streets shimmer. Her dress was torn and covered in dust, her dark hair tangled and wild, her feet bleeding through boots that had walked too many miles. She did not remember much of the journey, only that she had moved because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant seeing their faces again. The general store owner, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, found her collapsed on the wooden steps of the mercantile. She did not ask questions when Ophelia whispered that her name was Rose, just Rose, and that she needed work. Mrs. Patterson had seen enough broken people drift through Bismarck to know that some stories were better left untold until the teller was ready. For 3 weeks, Ophelia, who now called herself Rose, swept floors, stocked shelves, and helped customers with their purchases. She barely spoke beyond what was necessary, and when people tried to make conversation, she would offer a tight smile and find something urgent that needed her attention. At night, she slept in the small room above the store that Mrs. Patterson had offered her, and she would lie awake staring at the ceiling, trying not to hear the screams that echoed in her memory. It was on a Thursday afternoon in late September when Isaac Webb walked into the store, his spurs chiming softly against the wooden floor. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of summer grass. He removed his hat when he entered, revealing brown hair that was a bit too long, and he nodded politely to Mrs. Patterson before his gaze landed on Rose. She was arranging cans of beans on a shelf, her movements mechanical and precise, and she did not notice him at first. He watched her for a moment, something in her stillness catching his attention. Most people moved through the world with a certain ease, but she moved like someone who was trying very hard not to break. "Excuse me, miss," he said gently, and she startled so violently that she nearly knocked over the entire display. "I apologize," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "Did not mean to frighten you." She pressed a hand to her chest, her heart hammering, and forced herself to breathe. "No, I should have been paying better attention. What can I help you with?" "I need about 20 pounds of flour, some coffee, salt, and whatever vegetables you have that will keep for a week or so," he said, his voice low and careful as if he was speaking to a spooked horse. She nodded and began gathering his supplies, grateful for the familiar task. He watched her work, noting the way her hands trembled slightly when she reached for items on higher shelves, the way she kept her body angled so she could see the door at all times. "You are new in town," he observed, not making it a question. "A few weeks now," she replied without looking at him. "Where did you come from?" her hands stilled on a sack of flour. "Does it matter?" He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I suppose not. We all come from somewhere we would rather forget, one way or another." She glanced at him then, really looked at him, and saw something in his expression that was not pity or curiosity, just understanding. It unnerved her more than questions would have. She finished gathering his supplies and calculated the cost. He paid without haggling, which was unusual for most cowboys who came through, and as he gathered his purchases, he paused. "Name is Isaac Webb," he said. "I have a ranch about 5 miles north of here. If you ever need anything, you just ask around for the Webb place." "Why would I need anything from you?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. He smiled slightly, not offended. Maybe you would not, but the offer stands all the same. Then he tipped his hat to her and left, and she found herself staring at the door long after he had gone. Mrs. Patterson came over with a knowing look. Isaac Webb is a good man. Lost his family to fever 4 years back. Been running that ranch by himself ever since. Rose did not respond, but something in her chest tightened at the information. Another person carrying weight they did not ask for. Isaac came into the store every week after that, always needing supplies, always polite and careful with his words. He never asked her personal questions again, but he would tell her small things about his day, about the horses he was training, about the weather and the land. She found herself listening despite herself, found that his voice was steady and calm, and it made the noise in her head quiet down for a few moments. One afternoon in October, when the leaves were starting to turn and the air had a bite to it, he asked, "What should I call you?" She looked up from the ledger she was writing in. "What do you mean? Mrs. Patterson calls you Rose, but I notice you flinch a little every time someone says it, like it does not quite fit." Her throat tightened. "It is my name." "All right," he said easily. "What do you wish to be called?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her what she wanted, not since everything had happened. They had told her to be grateful she survived, to move forward, to forget, but no one had asked what she needed. "I do not know," she whispered. "That is all right too," he said. "You let me know when you figure it out." That night, she lay in her bed and thought about names, about how the woman she had been was dead and buried in the ashes of that cabin. Ophelia had been a daughter, a sister, a person who believed the world was mostly good. Rose was a placeholder, a name that meant nothing, that connected to nothing. She wanted to be someone new, someone who could exist in this broken body without the weight of everything she had lost. Over the following weeks, she began to notice things about Isaac that she had not let herself see before. The way he was patient with the horses that got spooked easily, talking to them in that same low, steady voice he used with her. The way he helped old Mr. Henderson load his supplies into his wagon without being asked. The way he never pushed her to talk, but always listened when she did. It was early November when a group of rough-looking men came into the store. There were 3 of them, smelling of whiskey and sweat, and they looked around with the kind of eyes that cataloged everything they could take. Rose felt her blood turn to ice, her body locking up as memories crashed over her. One of them approached the counter where she stood. "Well, ain't you a pretty thing?" he said, his smile showing too many teeth. She could not speak, could not move. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. "My friend asked you a question," another one said, moving closer. The door opened with a bang that made everyone jump. Isaac stood in the doorway, and though he was not pointing a gun, his hand rested easily on the revolver at his hip. His expression was pleasant, but his eyes were hard as flint. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said. "Hope you are finding everything you need." The tension in the room shifted. The men looked at Isaac, calculating, and apparently decided he was not worth the trouble. They mumbled something about coming back later and left. Rose realized she was shaking. Isaac crossed to her quickly. "Are you all right?" She nodded, but tears were streaming down her face and she hated herself for it. "I am fine." "You are not fine," he said gently, "and that is all right." "I cannot keep falling apart," she said, her voice breaking. "I cannot keep being this person who is afraid of everything." "You survived something terrible," he said. "I do not know what it was and you do not have to tell me, but being afraid does not make you weak. It makes you human." She looked up at him, this man who barely knew her but had shown her more kindness than she knew how to accept. "Why do you care?" "Because I know what it is like to lose everything. he said simply. "And I know what it is like to think you will never be whole again. Someone helped me when I needed it most. Figured I could do the same if you would let me." Something in her chest cracked open just a little. "My real name is Ophelia," she whispered. "Ophelia Jennings, but I cannot be her any more." "Then do not be," he said. "Be whoever you need to be." "I do not know who that is yet." "Then I will wait until you do." That winter was hard. The snow came early and stayed late, and the cold seeped into everything. Isaac kept coming to the store, and slowly, carefully, Rose began to talk to him. She told him small things at first, about the books she used to read, about how she loved the smell of bread baking, about how she had always wanted to learn to ride a horse properly, but had never had the chance. He listened to all of it like every word mattered. And then one day in January he said, "Would you like to come out to the ranch? I have a mare who is gentle as a kitten. I could teach you to ride if you wanted." She almost said no out of habit, out of fear. But something in her was tired of being afraid, tired of letting what had happened control every moment of her life. "Yes," she said, "I would like that." The following Sunday he picked her up in a wagon and they rode out to his ranch. It was a modest spread with a sturdy house, a barn and several corrals. Everything was neat and well maintained, the mark of a man who took pride in his work. The mare he brought out was a beautiful chestnut with a white blaze down her face. "This is Clover," he said. "She is about the most patient creature you will ever meet." He showed her how to approach the horse, how to let Clover smell her hand, how to stroke her neck. The horse was warm and solid under her palm, and Rose felt some of the tightness in her chest ease. Isaac taught her how to saddle the horse, explaining each strap and buckle with patience. Then he helped her mount, his hands steady on her waist as he lifted her up. For a moment she tensed at the touch, but his hands were gone as soon as she was settled, giving her space. "How does it feel?" he asked, looking up at her. "Hi," she said, and he laughed, a warm sound that made her smile despite herself. He led Clover around the corral at first, walking beside them and talking about how to hold the reins, how to shift her weight, how to communicate with the horse through gentle pressure. Rose listened and learned, and for the first time in months she felt something other than fear or grief. She felt alive. After an hour, Isaac suggested they take a break, and they sat on the porch of his house with cups of coffee. The winter sun was weak but bright, and the snow sparkled across the fields. "Thank you for this," she said quietly. "You do not have to thank me," he replied. "I like having you here." She looked at him, at the honesty in his face, and felt something shift in her chest. It scared her, this feeling, because it meant letting someone in, and she was not sure she knew how to do that anymore. But Isaac did not push. He just sat beside her, solid and steady, and let her be whoever she needed to be in that moment. She started coming to the ranch every Sunday. Isaac taught her to ride, and as she grew more confident, they would go out on longer rides across his property and into the surrounding countryside. He showed her places where wildflowers would bloom in the spring, where a creek ran clear and cold, where you could see for miles in every direction. She started telling him more about her past, little pieces at first. She told him she had lived with her family on a homestead. She told him that raiders had come in the night. She told him she had hidden while they burned everything, and that she had crawled away when it was over because staying meant dying. He never said he was sorry, never offered empty platitudes. He just listened, and sometimes he would reach over and take her hand, and they would sit in silence while the horses grazed nearby. In March, when the snow finally started to melt and the world began to thaw, Rose realized she was falling in love with Isaac Webb. It terrified her because love meant vulnerability, and she had learned the hard way that vulnerable things got destroyed. But Isaac was not like anyone she had ever known. He was patient and kind, but he was also strong in a way that had nothing to do with physical strength. He had survived his own losses and had not let them make him hard or bitter. He had chosen to stay soft, to stay open, and that took a kind of courage she was only beginning to understand. One evening in late April, they were sitting by the creek, watching the sun set in shades of orange and pink. The air smelled like new grass and possibility, and Rose felt something in her finally relax, finally let go of the constant vigilance that had kept her alive, but had also kept her from living. "I think I want to be called Alina," she said suddenly. Isaac looked at her with those steady green eyes. "Alina, it was my grandmother's name. She was the strongest person I ever knew. She survived things that should have broken her, but she never let them steal her joy." Rose paused, then corrected herself. "I want to be called Alina because it reminds me that survival is not just about staying alive. It is about finding reasons to keep living." Isaac smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Alina, it suits you." "Ophelia Jennings," she said, testing the name on her tongue. It felt right in a way that Rose never had, in a way that even Ophelia no longer could. "Ophelia Jennings," Isaac repeated softly, and when he said it, it sounded like a promise. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Isaac said, "I have something I need to tell you." Her heart clenched, bracing for bad news. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you," he said, looking right at her. "Have been for months now, if I am being honest. And I know you have been through hell, and I know you might not be ready for that, or maybe you do not feel the same way. But I figured you should know, because I am tired of pretending I do not feel what I feel." Alina stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. "Isaac, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. No pressure, no expectations. I will keep being your friend either way." "I am afraid," she whispered. "Everyone I have ever loved has been taken from me. I do not know if I can survive losing someone else." "I am afraid too," he said. "Loving someone means risking that kind of pain. But Alina, I would rather risk it with you than spend the rest of my life safe and alone." She looked at him. This man who had seen her at her most broken and had never tried to fix her, had just walked beside her while she put herself back together. And she realized that she had a choice. She could let fear keep her locked away, keep her safe but small. Or she could take a chance on something beautiful and terrifying and real. "I love you too," she said, and when she said it, she felt like she was finally, fully alive again. Isaac reached for her, and she went to him without hesitation. His kiss was gentle and sure, and it tasted like coffee and hope and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling, and Alina felt tears on her cheeks, but for once, they were not tears of grief. They got married in June at the small church in Bismarck with Mrs. Patterson and a few of Isaac's ranch hands as witnesses. Alina wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, and Isaac wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous. When the preacher asked if she took Isaac to be her husband, Alina said yes without a moment of hesitation, and when Isaac slipped a simple gold band on her finger, she felt like she was being given a second chance at life. They moved into Isaac's ranch house, and Alina slowly made it their home. She planted a garden with vegetables and flowers, learning which plants thrived in the Dakota soil. She helped Isaac with the horses, discovering that she had a knack for gentling the wilder ones, speaking to them in the same patient way he had spoken to her. Life was not perfect. There were nights when Alina woke up screaming from nightmares, and Isaac would hold her until the fear passed. There were days when the grief would crash over her without warning, and she would have to sit down wherever she was and just breathe until she could stand again. But Isaac never made her feel weak for those moments. He just stayed close, a steady presence, and reminded her that healing was not linear, that some wounds took a lifetime to mend, and that was all right. In their first year of marriage, they expanded the ranch, buying more horses and beginning to build a reputation for training some of the finest mounts in the territory. Alina discovered she loved the business side of things, keeping the books and negotiating with buyers. She was good at it, and it gave her a sense of purpose that felt like reclaiming parts of herself she thought had died. They made friends with their neighbors, hosting dinners and attending barn dances. Alina was nervous at first, worried that people would ask too many questions about her past, but Isaac had quietly spread the word that Alina's history was her own business, and the good people of Bismarck respected that. In the autumn of 1879, Alina realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment, he just stared at her, and then a smile broke across his face so bright it could have lit up the whole prairie. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you happy?" She asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy?" He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Alina, I am so happy I do not have words for it. The pregnancy was not easy." Alina struggled with sickness in the early months, and as she grew larger, she found herself gripped by fears she could not quite name. What if something went wrong? What if she was not a good mother? What if she could not protect this child the way she had not been able to protect her family? Isaac was endlessly patient with her worries. "You are the strongest person I know," he told her, "and this baby is going to be so lucky to have you as a mother." "How can you be so sure?" she asked. "Because I know you," he said simply. "I have watched you rebuild yourself from nothing. I have seen you face your fears and come out the other side. That takes a kind of strength most people never find." In May of 1880, Alina gave birth to a son. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when she thought she might not survive it. But when the midwife finally placed the baby in her arms, all the pain disappeared, replaced by a love so fierce it took her breath away. They named him James, after Isaac's father. He had Isaac's green eyes and a surprisingly full head of dark hair. Isaac cried when he held his son for the first time, and Alina fell in love with her husband all over again, watching him cradle that tiny life with such gentleness. Those early months were exhausting in a way Alina had not anticipated. James was colicky and slept poorly, and there were nights when both she and Isaac walked the floors with him, taking turns trying to soothe him. But even in her exhaustion, Alina felt grateful. This was the life she had thought she would never have. The family she had believed was lost to her forever. As James grew, he became the center of their world. He was a happy baby, always smiling and curious about everything. Alina would take him out to the garden with her, letting him sit in the dirt while she weeded and planted, and he would laugh at the butterflies and reach for the flowers. Isaac taught James to love horses before he could even walk, holding him in the saddle while riding gentle Clover around the corral. "Got to start them young," he would say with a grin, and Alina would watch them with her heart so full it hurt. In the summer of 1881, a wagon train passing through stopped at their ranch to rest the horses. Among the travelers was an older woman who reminded Alina so much of her mother that she had to excuse herself to cry in the barn. Isaac found her there, holding her while she sobbed out grief she thought she had processed. "I wish they could have met James," she said. "I wish they could have known I survived, that I built a good life." "They know," Isaac said. "Wherever they are, they know, and they are proud of you." Alina wanted to believe that. She chose to believe it because the alternative was too heavy to carry. That autumn, Isaac's cousin came to visit from Texas. His name was Matthew, and he was loud and boisterous, full of stories about cattle drives and narrow escapes from rustlers. Alina liked him immediately, appreciating the way he made Isaac laugh with an ease she rarely saw. One evening, after James had been put to bed, the three of them sat on the porch watching the stars come out. Matthew asked the question Alina had been expecting eventually. "So, Alina, what brought you to North Dakota?" She felt Isaac tense beside her, ready to deflect, but she put a hand on his knee. "I survived something I should not have," she said evenly. "Lost my family, came here to start over." Matthew was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Takes guts to do that. Start over, I mean. Most people just give up." "I almost did," Alina admitted, "but I met someone who helped me remember that surviving is not the same as living." She looked at Isaac as she said it, and he smiled at her, that same steady smile that had helped her through the darkest times. Life continued with its rhythms of seasons and small joys. James grew into a bright, energetic toddler who wanted to do everything his father did. In 1883, Alina found out she was pregnant again. This time, the fear was less, replaced by excitement and hope. Their daughter was born in February of 1884 during a snowstorm so fierce that the midwife barely made it to the house in time. They named her Catherine after Alina's mother, and she came into the world screaming with an impressive set of lungs. Catherine was different from James in every way. Where he had been fussy, she was content. Where he had been cautious, she was bold. By the time she was 6 months old, she was already trying to crawl after her brother, determined not to be left behind. Watching her two children play together, Alina felt a peace she had not known was possible. Yes, she still had hard days. Yes, she still carried scars that would never fully heal. But she had built something beautiful from the ashes of her old life, and that was its own kind of victory. In the spring of 1885, Bismarck experienced a drought that tested everyone's resilience. The creek on their property ran low, and several of the neighboring ranches lost cattle. Isaac worked himself nearly to exhaustion trying to keep their horses watered and fed, and Alina helped however she could while managing two small children. One particularly hot afternoon, Alina was in the garden trying to save what plants she could when James, now 5 years old, came running up to her. "Mama, there is a man at the gate." Alina's heart jumped, old fears surfacing. She picked up Catherine and took James's hand, walking carefully toward the front of the property. A man on a tired-looking horse sat at the gate, and when he saw them, he removed his hat. "Afternoon, madam. I am looking for work, willing to do just about anything for meals and a place to sleep." Alina studied him. He looked worn and desperate but not dangerous. "Still," she said, "my husband is in the barn. You can speak with him about it." The man, who introduced himself as Thomas, turned out to be a godsend. He was a hard worker who knew horses, and having an extra set of hands during the drought made all the difference. By the time the rains finally came in July, Isaac had offered Thomas a permanent position, and he built a small cabin on the far side of their property. The ranch continued to grow. By 1886, they had 20 horses and a solid reputation that brought buyers from as far as Montana. Alina had turned out to have a sharp eye for business, and she expanded their operations to include selling tack and equipment, turning one of the barns into a small shop. James started school in Bismarck that year, riding into town with Isaac 3 days a week. He was bright and curious, asking endless questions about everything. Catherine, at 2, was already showing signs of being just as clever, and Isaac joked that they were raising a pair of geniuses who would probably outsmart them by the time they were 10. One evening in October, Isaac came in from working with the horses to find Alina sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread around her. She looked up at him with shining eyes. I did the calculations 3 times to make sure, she said. We made enough profit this year to buy the Henderson property. The Henderson ranch bordered theirs to the east. Old Mr. Henderson had died the previous winter, and his children, who lived back east, were eager to sell. It would nearly double their land and give them access to another water source. Are you sure? Isaac asked, sitting down beside her. I am sure, she said. Isaac, we built this from nothing, and now we can make it even better. He looked at her, this woman who had come to Bismarck broken and terrified, who had slowly become one of the strongest people he knew. You are amazing, you know that, she laughed. I learned from the best. They bought the Henderson property in November and spent the winter making plans for how to integrate it into their operation. It was hard work, but it was good work, the kind that left them tired but satisfied at the end of each day. In 1887, Alina's garden had become famous in the area. Despite the harsh Dakota climate, she had figured out which plants thrived and which needed extra care. She started selling her excess produce at the market in Bismarck, and women would come specifically to ask her advice about their own gardens. It was during one of these market days that a woman approached her with a familiar look in her eyes, that haunted expression Alina recognized from her own reflection in the early days. The woman was young, maybe 20, and she was asking about tomato plants, but her hands shook and her eyes kept darting to the crowd. Alina gently asked, Are you all right? The woman's eyes filled with tears. I am fine. I am sorry, I should not wait, Alina said. She told Mrs. Patterson, who was minding the stall next to hers, that she would be right back, and she walked with the woman to a quiet spot near the church. What is your name? Alina asked gently. Mary, the woman whispered. Mary, I do not know what happened to you, but I can see that you are hurting. And I want you to know that you are not alone. Mary broke down then, and through her tears, she told Alina about fleeing an abusive husband, about being alone in Bismarck with nowhere to go and no one to help her. Alina listened, her heart aching with recognition. When Mary finished, Alina said, I survived something terrible too, different from your situation but terrible all the same, and someone helped me when I needed it most. Let me help you. She brought Mary home to the ranch, where Isaac immediately made her feel welcome. They set her up in the room above the barn that Thomas had vacated when he built his cabin, and Alina helped her find work cleaning houses in town. Over the following months, Alina watched Mary slowly heal, slowly find her strength, and it felt like closing a circle, like taking the kindness she had been shown and passing it forward. By 1888, James was 8 and showing real talent with horses. He could ride anything Isaac put him on, and he had a gift for understanding what a horse needed before it even showed signs of trouble. Catherine, at 4, was fearless and constantly getting into mischief, whether it was climbing to the top of the barn or trying to catch wild rabbits. Alina sometimes looked at her children and marveled at the fact that they had never known the kind of fear she had lived with. They had grown up safe and loved, and that was perhaps the greatest gift she could give them. That summer, they hired 2 more ranch hands as the operation continued to expand. They now had 40 horses, and Isaac's reputation as a trainer had spread throughout the territory. Men would come from hundreds of miles away to buy a Webb horse, knowing they were getting an animal that was not just well-trained but genuinely cared for. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, Alina and Isaac would sit on the porch like they had in the early days. Sometimes they talked about their plans for the ranch, about James's schooling, about whether Catherine would ever slow down. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. You ever regret it? Alina asked one night. Taking a chance on someone as broken as I was. Isaac turned to her, his expression serious. "Alina, you were never broken. You were hurt, and there is a difference. And no, I have never regretted a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think that what happened to me destroyed who I was, but I think maybe it just changed me, made me into someone different, someone who appreciates what she has because she knows how easily it can be lost." "You became Alina," Isaac said softly. "And I am grateful every day that you chose to let me be part of that journey." In 1889, they celebrated their 9th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over, and there was music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. Alina looked around at the life they had created, at the community they had become part of, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Mrs. Patterson, now in her 70s and still running the mercantile with the help of her daughter, pulled Alina aside at one point. "I am proud of you, dear. When you came to me all those years ago, I worried you might not make it, but look at you now." "I had help," Alina said, smiling. "We all need help," Mrs. Patterson replied. "The trick is being brave enough to accept it." That autumn, Alina started teaching Catherine to read, sitting with her every afternoon with picture books and primers. Catherine was quick and eager, and within a few months, she was reading simple stories on her own. James, meanwhile, had started helping his father train the younger horses, showing patience and skill beyond his years. In 1890, North Dakota became a state, and there was a celebration in Bismarck with speeches and fireworks. The Webb family attended, and James was fascinated by the whole affair, asking questions about government and statehood that Isaac had to admit he did not always know how to answer. "That boy is going to be something special," Isaac said on the ride home. "They both are," Alina replied, looking at Catherine, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. Life had its challenges, of course. There was the winter of 1891 when a blizzard killed 3 of their horses and damaged one of the barns. There was the summer James fell from a horse and broke his arm, and Alina's heart nearly stopped until the doctor assured them he would be fine. There was the constant work, the endless cycle of feeding and training and maintaining and planning. But through it all, Alina and Isaac had each other. They had built something that could weather the storms, both literal and figurative. They had created a partnership based on respect and trust, and a love that had grown deeper with each passing year. In the spring of 1892, Alina found out she was pregnant again. She was 32 now, and this pregnancy felt different from the others. She was tired more easily and dealing with aches she had not experienced before. But when she told Isaac, his face lit up with the same joy he had shown with the first 2, and she felt her own excitement grow to match his. Their 3rd child, a boy they named Daniel, was born in December during one of the coldest weeks of the year. He was small but healthy, and he had Isaac's smile and Alina's dark eyes. James, now 12, was fascinated by his baby brother and wanted to help with everything. Catherine, at 8, was less interested but would occasionally deign to hold him, treating it like a serious responsibility. As Alina held Daniel, she thought about how far she had come from that terrified woman who had stumbled into Bismarck 14 years ago. She had been so certain that her life was over, that she would never be anything but a ghost haunting her own existence. But she had been wrong. With Isaac's help, she had found a way to live again, to love again, to build something meaningful from the wreckage. She had taken the name Alina because she wanted to embody her grandmother's strength, and she thought maybe she had succeeded. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. James graduated from school in 1894 and decided he wanted to stay on the ranch rather than go to college, much to Isaac's delight. Catherine was showing interest in becoming a teacher, spending hours with her books, and helping some of the younger children in town with their lessons. In 1895, Mary, the woman Alina had helped years ago, got married to a widower from Bismarck, a kind man who owned a hardware store. At the wedding, Mary pulled Alina aside and thanked her for saving her life. "You gave me hope when I had none," Mary said, tears in her eyes. "I will never forget that. You saved yourself," Alina replied. "I just helped you see that you could." By 1896, the Webb Ranch was one of the most successful in the region. They employed 6 ranch hands year-round and had expanded into breeding as well as training. James had proven to have an even better eye for horses than Isaac, able to spot quality in bloodlines that would make all the difference in future generations. Alina's garden had expanded to nearly an acre, and she sold produce and flowers throughout the summer months. She had also started a small library in Bismarck, donating books and encouraging literacy throughout the community. It was her way of giving back, of making sure others had access to the things that had helped her heal. On a warm evening in June of 1897, Alina and Isaac sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. Daniel, now 4, was playing in the yard with a wooden horse Isaac had carved for him. Catherine was inside practicing piano, the notes drifting through the open windows. James was out checking on the horses, preparing for an early morning departure to deliver 3 trained mounts to a buyer in Montana. "You ever miss her?" Isaac asked quietly. "The woman you were before?" Alina considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I miss my family every day. I miss the innocence of believing the world was safe. But Ophelia died in that cabin, and I do not think I would want to bring her back even if I could. She was not strong enough for the life I have now." "Alina is strong enough for anything," Isaac said, taking her hand. "Alina had help," she replied, echoing the words she had said to Mrs. Patterson years ago. Alina had a cowboy who called her whatever she wished, who let her become whoever she needed to be. That made all the difference. Isaac brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. And that cowboy got to spend his life with the most remarkable woman he ever met. I would say we both got pretty lucky. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Inside, Catherine finished her piece and started another one, something bright and cheerful. Daniel's laughter rang out as he galloped his toy horse around the yard. This was what Alina had built from the ashes. Not just a ranch or a business or even a family, though it was all of those things. She had built a life that mattered, that had meaning and purpose and joy. She had taken the worst thing that could happen to a person and had refused to let it be the end of her story. In 1898, James met a girl named Sarah who worked at her father's store in Bismarck. She was sweet and clever, and Isaac and Alina both approved when James asked permission to court her. They were married in the spring of 1899, and James built a house on the eastern section of the ranch so he could stay close to the business. Catherine, now 15, had indeed decided to become a teacher. She was planning to attend normal school in Minneapolis the following year, and though Alina would miss her terribly, she was proud of her daughter's ambition and drive. In the summer of 1900, Alina turned 40. The ranch threw a party for her, and the house was filled with friends and family and laughter. At one point, she stepped outside to catch her breath, overwhelmed by the fullness of it all. Isaac found her there, as he always did. "You all right?" "More than all right," she said. "I was just thinking about how different my life is from what I thought it would be. When I came to Bismarck, I could not imagine ever feeling happy again, and now—" She gestured to the house, to the sounds of celebration inside. "Now I have this." "You built this," Isaac corrected. "With your strength and courage and determination." "We built it," she said firmly. "Together." He pulled her close, and they stood there under the stars, swaying slightly to the music drifting from inside. After all these years, his arms still felt like the safest place in the world. In 1901, James and Sarah had a baby girl, making Alina and Isaac grandparents for the first time. Alina held her granddaughter and marveled at the continuation of life, at the way hope could take root and grow even in the hardest soil. Catherine left for school that autumn, and the house felt too quiet without her. But she wrote long letters every week, full of her experiences and observations, and Alina treasured every word. Daniel, now 9, had started helping more with the ranch work. He was different from James, less interested in the horses themselves and more fascinated by the business side of things. He would sit with Alina in the evenings, asking questions about profit margins and breeding records and market trends. "This one is going to run the whole operation someday," Isaac predicted, ruffling Daniel's hair. The early years of the new century brought changes. The railroad expanded, making it easier to transport horses to distant buyers. Automobiles started appearing in Bismarck, though most people still relied on horses for daily work. The world was modernizing, but the ranch remained a constant, a place where hard work and good values still mattered most. In 1903, Catherine came home from school with a degree and a job offer to teach at the Bismarck School. She was 21 now, poised and confident, and Alina could hardly believe this was the same little girl who had once climbed to the top of the barn to see if she could fly. That summer, James and Sarah had a son, and the Webb family continued to grow. The ranch now employed 12 people year-round, and they had expanded to include cattle along with the horses. It was more than Isaac had ever dreamed of when he first started the operation after losing his first family. One evening in the autumn of 1904, Alina and Isaac took a ride out to the creek where they had spent so many important moments over the years. The leaves were changing colors, and the air had that crisp quality that promised winter was not far behind. "I have been thinking," Isaac said as they sat by the water. "Maybe it is time to start stepping back a bit. Let James and Daniel take over more of the operations." "Are you getting tired of the work?" Alina asked, concerned. "Not tired," he said. "Just aware of time passing. I want to make sure we have time to enjoy what we built, to travel maybe, to spend time with the grandchildren, to just be together without always worrying about the next thing that needs doing." Alina nodded slowly. "I think that sounds wonderful." They began the process of transition gradually. James took over the breeding program entirely, making decisions about bloodlines and training protocols. Daniel, at 13, was already handling much of the bookkeeping with Alina's guidance. Catherine helped in the evenings and on weekends, teaching but still connected to the family business. In 1905, Isaac and Alina took their first real vacation, traveling to Denver to see the mountains. It was strange at first, being away from the ranch, but it was also liberating. They spent 2 weeks exploring and relaxing, and Alina felt like she was seeing the world through new eyes. When they returned, James had everything running smoothly, proving that he was more than capable of managing things. It gave both Alina and Isaac peace of mind about the future. The years of 1906 and 1907 were good ones. The ranch continued to prosper, the family continued to grow, and Alina and Isaac settled into a rhythm that allowed them to work when they wanted but also to rest and enjoy the fruits of their labor. In the spring of 1908, on their 24th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Alina with a new piano, a beautiful upright that he had shipped from Chicago. Catherine played at the celebration, and the house was filled with music and love, and the kind of joy that comes from years of building something meaningful together. Alina stood in the doorway watching her family, and she thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Bismarck. That frightened girl who could barely speak her own name, who had thought her life was over. She had survived what no one should have to survive, and she had come out the other side not unscathed but whole in the ways that mattered. Isaac came up beside her and slipped an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About names," she said. "About how I changed mine because I needed to become someone new, but now I realize that all of it was me. Ophelia, Rose, Alina, they are all parts of who I am." "You are the woman I love," Isaac said simply, "whatever name you choose." She leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had anchored her through everything. "I choose Alina, because she is who I became with you." As summer arrived and the prairie bloomed with wildflowers, Alina spent her days in the garden and with her grandchildren, teaching them to plant and nurture and grow. Daniel was preparing to head to college in the fall to study business, planning to bring new ideas back to the ranch. Catherine was courting a lawyer from Bismarck, a good man who reminded Alina a bit of Isaac in his quiet strength. One afternoon in July, Alina was sitting under the cottonwood tree in the front yard, watching James teach his children to rope, the same way Isaac had taught him. The circle of life continuing, the lessons passing from generation to generation. Isaac came out and sat beside her, taking her hand in his weathered one. They had both aged, lines on their faces that spoke of years lived and work done and laughter shared. But when Alina looked at him, she still saw the cowboy who had walked into the general store all those years ago, who had been patient and kind, and had let her be whoever she needed to be. "I love you," she said, because it was important to say it often, to never take it for granted. "I love you too," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Always have, always will." They sat together in the shade, watching their family, watching the land they had built their life on, and Alina felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. She had survived the unsurvivable, had found the strength to go on when everything in her wanted to give up. And in the process, she had discovered that the human heart was more resilient than she had ever imagined, capable of healing and loving and building even after being shattered. The cowboy had called her whatever she wished, had given her the space and grace to become who she needed to be. And she had used that gift to create a life of meaning and purpose, to raise children and build a legacy and help others who were struggling the way she once had. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Alina closed her eyes and breathed in the sweet prairie air. This was home. This was family. This was the happy ending she had thought was impossible, the one she had fought for with every breath and every step forward, no matter how hard it was, and it was worth it. Every moment of pain, every sleepless night, every battle with fear and grief had been worth it to arrive at this place of peace and love and belonging. The ranch would continue after them, she knew. James would run it with skill and care, and Daniel would bring it into the modern age. Their grandchildren would grow up knowing this land, loving these horses, carrying forward the values that Alina and Isaac had built their life around. But for now, in this moment, Alina simply sat beside the man who had saved her by letting her save herself, and she was grateful. Grateful for second chances and new names, and the courage to keep going when everything seemed lost. The evening star appeared in the darkening sky, bright and constant, and Alina made no wishes on it. She had everything she needed right here, right now, in this beautiful life she had created from the ashes of the old one. Isaac leaned over and kissed her forehead, gentle and sweet, and somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied and a child laughed, and the world kept turning, full of possibility and hope and love that endured through everything. Isaac Webb, who had once been Ophelia Jennings and rose with no last name, had survived what no one should. And the cowboy had called her whatever she wished, had loved her through all her transformations, had been steady and true and exactly what she needed. Together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone, a testament to the power of resilience and love, and choosing to live even when survival seemed like the only option. The stars came out one by one, filling the vast Dakota sky, and Alina and Isaac sat beneath them, hands clasped, hearts full, their story complete and perfect and wholly their own. They had won their happiness through hard work and faith, and refusing to give up on themselves or each other. And as the years continued to unfold, as more grandchildren were born and the ranch evolved with the changing times, the foundation they had built remained strong. When people in Bismarck told stories about the Webb family, they spoke of the strength and integrity and love that defined them. They spoke of Isaac, the cowboy who had treated everyone with dignity and respect, who had built a successful business through honest work and genuine care for his animals and his people. And they spoke of Alina, the woman who had arrived broken and alone and had become a pillar of the community, someone who helped others and created beauty and raised children who would make their own mark on the world. In their later years, when their hair had gone silver and their bodies had slowed, Alina and Isaac would still take rides out to that creek where so much of their love story had unfolded. They would sit together and remember and dream and simply be. And when people asked Alina about her past, about where she came from and how she came to be in Bismarck, she would smile and say, "I survived something terrible, and I found something beautiful. That is all anyone needs to know." Because some stories were too painful to tell in full, but the ending, the happy ending that she had fought so hard for, was worth sharing. It was proof that people could heal, that love could triumph, that choosing to go on was always, always worth it. The Webb Ranch thrived for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they found each other at exactly the right time. And though the world changed around them, though technology advanced and the Wild West became something people only read about in books, the core values that Alina and Isaac had established remained constant. They had shown that strength was not about never being broken, but about finding ways to put yourself back together. They had shown that love was not just about the easy moments, but about standing beside someone through their darkest times. They had shown that home was not just a place, but the people you chose to build your life with. And so the story of the woman who survived what no one should, and the cowboy who called her whatever she wished, became the kind of love story that people told their children and grandchildren. A reminder that even from the deepest darkness, light could emerge and hope could be reborn, and happiness could be found if you were brave enough to reach for it. Alina and Isaac lived out their days surrounded by family and love, their hearts full, their legacy secure. They had taken broken pieces and created something whole, something beautiful, something that would endure long after they were gone. And that was the greatest gift of all, the proof that survival was just the beginning, and that with courage and love and the right person by your side, you could build a life beyond anything you ever imagined possible. Their story ended not with tragedy but with triumph, not with loss but with abundance, not with fear but with love so deep and true that it changed everyone it touched. The woman who had changed her name found that identity was not fixed but fluid, that she could be whoever she needed to be and still be wholly, authentically herself. And the cowboy who called her whatever she wished proved that true love meant accepting someone completely, giving them space to grow and change and heal, and standing firm beside them through it all. Together, they wrote a story of redemption and resilience, of second chances and hard-won happiness, of building a legacy that would last for generations. It was a story worthy of the Wild West itself, full of challenges and victories, hardships and joys, and ultimately, a love that conquered all.